few years ago, a friend told me something that made me feel really good. This person told me that they had seen me many years ago, before they really knew me, speaking at a panel at the University of South Carolina. Now, the only panels I ever spoke on at the at the university was on the topic, always, of homosexuality and the Bible. So you can understand the temperature in the room. There was a lot of contention, a lot of argumentation going on. So while this person said they agreed with all of the arguments that I had made and that I had made them quite well, the feeling that they came away with, they said, was this: I thought you were really an angry person. You just had this countenance of anger. And that, of course, was not the part that lifted my heart. We'll get to that. that wasn't it. But first, you have to have a little bit of context before we get to the good part. I have been an angry person for most of my life. As I have revealed in past sermons, my anger issues have always stemmed from my parents' divorce when I was 9 years old, and it shattered my faith, not just in human beings, but in God as well. And I spent all of my teens into my 20s and well into my 30s being a very angry person and taking my anger out on anyone around me, be they friend, foe, or stranger. Speaking of Atlanta, I fully expected to die in a road rage incident before my 35th birthday, driving around Atlanta during all that time, because if there's any place to do it, Atlanta.
I think the battery has gone dead again.
I need to buy a whole new pack of batteries. These are like half full batteries. So. Please, everybody pray for my batteries. Anyway, so the moment I realized that anger had become a really, really bad problem in my life was not the incident where I stood nose to nose with a fellow traveler and child of God in Peachtree City, calling them everything but a child of God after a minor fender bender, and then the next day I woke up to 2 flat tires on my car. No, the moment I realized that I had an anger problem was when my ex, Wanda, put me out of the car while we were driving from Atlanta to Sumter. So the incident that sparked my rage, it really is not all of that important, but I ranted and raved about it during the entire car trip, and finally she stopped the car by the side of the road and she looked at me and she said, "Get out. I can't take this anymore." I promised. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll shut up. I'll be good for the rest of the trip. But she said, "No, get out." Luckily, her son Jamie was driving behind us, so I did have a lift to Sumter. But that incident, though, made me realize my anger was really coming at a high cost. It cost me relationships. It cost me jobs and friends and probably a lot of other opportunities I don't even know about. Right. That realization, though, by the side of Highway 378, it sent me on a journey to look deeply at the roots of my anger and finally find a way to heal. And what I found out was this: anger was a choice that I kept making. Because I felt my anger was righteous. But I realized it was just a self-defense tactic of a small, scared ego. My ego kept telling me that my anger would protect me from being hurt by anyone ever again, but all it really did was hold at bay a bunch of people who really, truly did want to love me. You are the light of the world, Jesus tells his listeners in today's gospel reading. When I was mired in my own anger and hatred, I wasn't anyone's light in the world. In fact, I was a light repellent. But to the ego, that's the place it wants to be. It wants to be in the dark. It wants to be alone. It wants to be brooding over the wounds and betrayal and grievances it blames for the world for inflicting upon it. But as I began to crack open that anger that has served as the bushel set so firmly on top of the light of the divine within myself, Little bits of rays of light began to shine through. The darkness of my own inner storm began to break apart because there were those around me who really did care for me, and they stuck with me through my struggles. They persisted in shining their light for me when I could not find a way to shine my own. You know, when a hurricane hits, it's usually the power that's knocked out first, right? The same is true during the storms of our inner life. My hurricane of anger brought with it some gale force winds, and it destroyed everything around me. However, there were people there. There were spiritual first responders who came to my rescue and shined their light for me. And this jubilance, that is our call as ministers of God, to shine the light of our holiness whenever we may see others in the dark, because we cannot bring our darkness to the light alone. In the middle of the stormiest times of my own life, when I did feel all alone, I can look back now, I can see there were people all around me, shining their light for me, trying to lead me out of my darkness. Friends, family, spiritual directors, therapists, authors that I was reading, even my enemies, and maybe the enemies were even the best, because they challenged me to the point of rage to try to shake that anger from my heart. And what I discovered later, with the wisdom of A Course in Miracles, was that every single person who did that or tried to do that for me was sent by God. They were sent to teach me the lessons I needed to learn so that one day I could release my anger and the ego's insistence that only it will keep me safe in the world. The goal of the curriculum, the Course says, regardless of the teacher you choose, is know thyself. There is nothing else to seek. Everyone is looking for their self and for the power and the glory they think they have lost. Whenever you are with anyone, you have another opportunity to find them. Your power and glory are in them because they are yours. Now, my ego reassured me that I didn't want to know myself because myself was this unlovable pile of rage and bitterness and anger. Why get to know that? It would tell me. You'll just feel worse. And the ego tried to keep me isolated. It used my anger to run anybody off who would dare to try to bring this life-changing idea that my world could be different if I just changed from a perspective of anger and fear to one of compassion and love. And there are a plethora of self-help books out there on the market of varying quality. But the genre itself is sort of a misnomer. There is no such thing as self-help. The Course says that if you only look at yourself, the self with a small s, your ego self, you cannot find yourself because that is not what you are. The real me is not encased in this lonely, angry ego, and the only way to find our higher divine self is to realize it resides not just within ourselves, but within everyone we meet. We think we have lost our power and our glory. We think we have lost our ability to be love. But whenever you are with anyone, you have the opportunity to find it in them. A Course in Miracles is all about relationships. This is not a selfish kind of thing. When you think you've lost yourself, you find it in another because you recognize their light, and that helps you remember your own light. What finally tore it for me, though, was this part that reads, whenever you are with a holy sibling, you are learning what you are because you are teaching what you are. They will respond, it says, either with pain or with joy, depending on which teacher you are following. They will be imprisoned or released according to your decision, and so will you. As I reflect on that moment during that car ride to Sumter, I realized that my anger was causing pain to the people around me that I cared about. My anger didn't only imprison me, but everyone else. And that jubilance is what finally broke my heart and changed my perspective. The Course would call that moment a miracle, because I realized it was time to start fully letting go of my anger. And it wouldn't happen overnight. And honestly, I still have my moments. But it was during this time of transition and processing that this friend saw me on that panel. And they could still feel the anger that I was doing battle with. A miracle, a shift in perception. It's not a magic pill that automatically puts us in our higher divine self forever and ever, amen. Instead, it's often just a pinprick of light that dimly breaks into the middle of our darkest night and makes our hearts yearn to touch that holy light within and tear apart the bushel of ego that keeps it from shining in this world. And in those moments of darkness, when you see that faint light of hope, jubilance, don't turn away in fear. Go toward the light. Because others are waiting there for you to come home to who you truly are. Breathe deeply. After this person told me just how angry I looked and felt to them on the night of the panel, they said to me, "But now you're different. I don't feel anger from you anymore. Instead, you have more of a countenance of peace." And I love this person because they use the word countenance. Right. Jubilance, I can't tell you how much that lifted my soul and how much those words meant, and they still mean to me. This was a moment when this friend shone her light of love my way, and instead of turning away like my angry ego would tell me to do, I embraced that light, and I shone my own light right back. Often the storms and the darkness of our lives continue because we choose to let them continue. I chose to stay angry until I chose not to stay angry. Instead of acknowledging the loving lights that appear around us and beckon us from our own darkness and despair, we tend to just shut our eyes and we believe the ego's lies that darkness is all there ever is, was, or shall be forever and ever. But that's a lie. That's a lie. The ego wants you to think that all you have is a human spirit, a spirit of fear and anger and greed and suspicion and despair and selfishness and evil. But the Apostle Paul, in his letter to the early church at Corinth, tells them the truth about themselves and about us all these years later. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, he tells them, but the Spirit that is from God, so that we may understand the gifts bestowed on us by God. And we speak of these things in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual things to those who are spiritual. That spirit of the world, jubilance, that is our ego. The false self that lives in its fear and its anger and its hatred and its separation. And that is not our true self, Paul says. Our true spirit, who we really are, is from God, so that we can understand the gifts that God has given to us. God has given to us the gift of love and compassion and kindness and understanding and patience, because that's what we're created out of. That's what God is. And God has gifted us with this heart of joy and adoration for all of life. And when we are in touch with that place, the words that we speak, the thoughts that we think, will be those only of love, not of anger or judgment or fear. Paul tells those early Christians and us today, we have the mind of Christ. We have the mind of Christ. Would those with the mind of Christ ever think angry, hateful, or destructive thoughts, not just against others, but against itself? No. Jubilance, we are powerful beyond measure simply because we have the mind of Christ. We have a higher divine self. We have a connection with the spaciousness of all that is. We have the ability to touch that deep piece of the holy that allows us to love even the most unlovable, that allows us to care for even those we perceive as the most despicable among us, that allows us to have mercy on even those our ego may judge as evil or irredeemable. This mind, jubilance, is not enveloped in darkness like the ego mind. Instead, it is full of light, and it shines on us even in our darkest night. It shines because other people are there to shine the light for us when we are unable to do so for ourselves. So I invite you this morning, Jubilants, stop hiding your light. Instead, take that egoic bushel off the divine light and let it shine so brightly in the world that others notice that you've changed, that you have become what Paul calls a new creation in Christ. Let us never forget that we have the responsibility not just to uncover our own light, but to be that light for our holy siblings when they are in darkness. Because we do not get into God's realm alone, Jubilants. We have to go together. We can leave no one behind in the darkness. So I invite you. Awareness is the key to all of this. I invite you to be aware of what you are teaching in every moment. Are you causing more pain in the world, or are you spreading more love? Are you imprisoning the people around you with your judgment or your anger, or are you freeing them with your love and your compassion? One of the reasons the course offers 365 lessons is because we are forgetful. We need daily reminders of who we are, who we truly are, and that love is the only lesson we should ever be learning and or teaching in this world. So I invite you to try to remember who you are in this and every moment. You are the light of the world. You are the mind of Christ. You have that divinity within, and so does everyone else, no matter what your ego thinks about them. So I invite you, Jubilants, shine your light when others can't, and accept that light from others when you have trouble shining your own. Because when you're shining the light and you are receiving the light, that's when the separation ends and we all get to say, oh yeah.